She was standing at the altar in the most beautiful dress she had ever worn in her life. The church smelled like white roses and warm candle wax. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, not from nerves, but from a secret she had been carrying alone for 3 weeks. A secret that her fiancé did not know. That her mother did not know. That not a single person in that room full of 200 guests had any idea about. She had told herself she could do this. That she could make it through the ceremony, through the vows, through the first dance, and deal with everything else later. But the human body does not negotiate. And right there, in front of everyone she loved, right there, in the most watched moment of her entire life, her legs gave out beneath her. The gasp that swept across that church was something nobody in that room will ever forget. Before we go any further, we want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let us get into this story, because what happened after she hit that floor changed absolutely everything. Her name was Maya Collins. 29 years old. A nurse by profession, which, when you hear what happened, makes the whole story cut even deeper. She grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knew your name and your grandmother's name and your grandmother's grandmother's name. She was the middle child of 3 girls, raised by a single mother named Diane who worked double shifts at a linen factory for most of Maya's childhood. Diane was not the type of woman who said, "I love you" easily, but she was the type who packed your lunch before she packed her own, who stayed up past midnight sewing a Halloween costume because she could not afford to buy one, and who never once, not a single morning, let her daughters walk out of that house without their hair combed and their shoes clean. Maya grew up watching her mother sacrifice, and it shaped her completely. She became the kind of person who gave more than she took. The kind of person who would carry a burden quietly rather than trouble someone else with it. She met Daniel Harris the way most love stories do not start, at a hospital. Not as patients. He was a respiratory therapist on the same floor where Maya worked nights in the cardiac unit. He was 33, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, and he had this habit of humming very softly to himself while he walked the hallways at 2 in the morning, completely unaware that anyone could hear him. Maya heard him for 4 straight nights before she finally said something. She leaned out of a patient's doorway and whispered, "You know you do that out loud, right?" He stopped walking. Looked at her. And instead of being embarrassed, he just smiled and said, "Was it bothering you?" She told him no. And she meant it. That was the beginning. They started sharing coffee breaks in the break room that smelled like old carpet and burnt decaf. They started texting after shifts. Then one evening in November, 3 months after they met, he drove 45 minutes across the city just to bring her soup because she mentioned during a text conversation that she felt a cold coming on. He did not announce it. He just showed up at her apartment door, handed her the bag, said "Eat before it gets cold," and turned around to leave. She called him back. And that was the real beginning. 2 years later, Daniel proposed in the same break room where they first had coffee together. He had asked the hospital manager for permission, arranged for the night shift staff to be there, and got down on one knee beside the coffee machine that always dripped on the counter. It was not glamorous. It was not a rooftop or a beach or a 5-star restaurant. It was fluorescent lights and linoleum floors and Maya crying so hard she could not even say yes out loud. She just nodded and grabbed his face with both hands. Later she would tell her sister that it was the most perfect proposal she could have imagined, because it was theirs. It belonged to them. Not to a photographer. Not to social media. Just to them. They planned the wedding for 14 months. A Saturday in September, at a historic church in downtown Columbus that Maya had loved since she was a little girl. Her mother, Diane, helped sew the details on the veil by hand. Daniel's mother flew in from Charlotte and cried the entire first dinner they all had together, not out of sadness, but because she said she had prayed for years that her son would find someone who looked at him the way Maya did. The guest list was 211 people. The flowers were ivory and dusty rose. The reception venue was a converted warehouse space with string lights hanging from exposed wooden beams. Everything was exactly as they had dreamed it. Everything was perfect. Except for one thing. 3 weeks before the wedding, Maya noticed something wrong. She was standing in the hospital break room, the same one where everything started, when a sharp, cramping pain moved through her lower abdomen. She chalked it up to stress. 14-hour shifts, wedding planning, barely sleeping. Of course her body was reacting. She took ibuprofen and kept moving. But the pain did not go away. It changed. Some days it was dull and heavy. Other days it was sharp enough to stop her mid-sentence. She started feeling exhausted in a way that went beyond tired, a bone-deep fatigue that made climbing one flight of stairs feel like running a mile. And then the fever started. Low grade at first. The kind you tell yourself is just a cold. The kind you dismiss when you have a wedding in 3 weeks and a mother who has been waiting her whole life to see you walk down that aisle. She did not tell Daniel. She kept repeating that decision to herself every night like a quiet argument she would tell him after the wedding. There was no point worrying him before the most important day of their lives. She would go to the doctor on the Monday after the honeymoon and figure out what was happening in her body. She was a nurse. She knew better than anyone the difference between something serious and something manageable. She convinced herself, the way only exhausted, terrified people can convince themselves, that she was fine. That she just needed to get through the ceremony. She had done harder things. She had watched patients fight for their lives on beds 3 feet from where she stood. She could handle 3 more weeks. The morning of the wedding, Maya woke up at 5:30 and felt a cold sweat on her sheets. Her temperature had climbed overnight. She sat at the edge of the bed for a long moment, listening to the silence of the hotel room, feeling the heat radiating from her own skin. Then she stood up, walked to the bathroom, ran cold water over her wrists the way she had taught anxious patients to do, and told her reflection in the mirror, out loud, alone, in that quiet hotel bathroom, "You are going to walk down that aisle." She took 2 more ibuprofen, touched up her foundation over the flush in her cheeks, and smiled at her bridesmaids when they arrived 2 hours later. Nobody noticed anything wrong. She was a nurse. She knew exactly how to look composed when she was not. And here is the question that will sit with you long after this video ends. Have you ever loved something or someone so much that you hid your own pain to protect it? Have you ever smiled through something that was quietly destroying you because you could not bear the thought of letting down the people counting on you? Because Maya was not being reckless. She was being the person she had always been, the person who absorbed difficulty quietly so that nobody else had to. The problem was that this time, the difficulty was not going to wait. The ceremony started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The church was warm, September sunlight pressing through the stained glass windows, casting long shapes of gold and amber across the wooden pews. Maya stood in the doorway of the church for exactly 30 seconds before she walked in, listening to the music swell, watching 200 people rise to their feet. She saw Daniel at the end of the aisle. He was already crying, quietly, one hand pressed to his mouth, the other hanging at his side, and when he saw her, he exhaled so visibly that people near the front actually heard it. She walked toward him slowly. She felt the pain with each step, like a fist tightening somewhere deep in her side. She kept her eyes on his face. Just his face. Nothing else. She made it to the altar. She handed her bouquet to her maid of honor. She took Daniel's hands in hers and felt how warm they were. The pastor began speaking, and she focused on breathing, slow and steady, the same rhythm she used during long night shifts when everything felt overwhelming. She thought, "I am almost there. I just need to get through the vows." She thought, "His hands are warm." She thought, after all of this, I am going to sit down." And then the room began to tilt. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just slowly, the way a ship lists before it goes under. The pastor's voice started sounding like it was coming from underwater. Daniel's face blurred at the edges. And Maya, who had spent her entire career helping people through their worst moments, who had held the hands of strangers while they faced the most frightening news of their lives, felt her own knees buckle. She had 1 second of absolute clarity. She thought, very calmly, "Here we go," and then everything went dark. The sound that went through that church is something the guests still describe years later. Not screaming. More like a collective intake of breath, 200 people all losing air at the same moment. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor. He moved so fast that nobody even saw the transition. One moment she was standing, the next he was on one knee on the altar carpet with Maya in his arms, her veil cascading around them both, calling her name in a voice nobody recognized because it contained a level of fear he had never shown another person in his life. Her maid of honor had her phone out immediately. Someone in the back of the church was already calling 911. Daniel's best man physically held Diane, Maya's mother, back from rushing forward because a crowd pressing in was the last thing Maya needed. And Daniel just stayed there on that floor, cradling her against his chest, whispering her name over and over, refusing to move. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. It felt like an hour to everyone in that building. When Maya regained consciousness, she was still on the floor, still in her wedding dress, still in Daniel's arms, and the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was his face 6 inches from hers, red from crying, jaw tight with controlled panic, watching her like she was the only thing in the room. The first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry." And he said, quietly and without a single pause, "Don't you dare apologize to me." She was taken to the hospital by ambulance. Daniel rode with her, still in his wedding suit. He did not let go of her hand once. At the hospital, the doctors ran every test. What they found explained everything, and nothing, at the same time. Maya had been developing a serious pelvic infection for weeks, the kind that can begin as something minor and escalate rapidly under stress, dehydration, and exertion. Her fever on the morning of the wedding had already been high enough to warrant medical attention. The physical demands of the ceremony, the standing, the heat of the church, the sustained physical strain on a body that was already fighting something, had pushed her system past its limit. The attending physician told Daniel privately that if Maya had not collapsed when she did, if she had pushed through the vows and gone into the reception and danced and posed for photographs the way she had planned, the infection could have progressed to something life-threatening within hours. The collapse, as terrifying as it was, may have been the thing that saved her life. Daniel sat with that information in a hospital corridor for a long time. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his wedding tie loosened and his shoes still shining from the morning. And then he went back into Maya's room and pulled a chair directly beside her bed and told her everything the doctor had said. Not softened. Not wrapped in comfort. All of it, exactly as he had heard it. Because that was the kind of man Daniel was, he did not protect her from truth. He sat beside her in it. Maya listened quietly. And when he finished, she started to cry. Not the polished, contained emotion of a woman trying to hold it together. Real crying. The kind that comes when you have been holding something too long and you finally let someone else know how much it weighed. She told him everything, the pain that had started 3 weeks earlier, the ibuprofen she had been taking every morning, the cold sweats, the fever on the morning of the wedding. She told him she thought she could just get through it. She told him she did not want to ruin the day. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very gently, "Maya, the only thing that would have ruined that day is losing you." She spent for days in the hospital. For days in a wedding gown that her nurses helped her change out of on the first night. For days with antibiotics and monitored recovery and a rotation of family and friends who took turns filling the room with flowers and terrible hospital coffee and genuine, overwhelming love. Diane, her mother, sat beside her bed on the first night and held her hand and said almost nothing at all, which, from Diane, was everything. Daniel never left the hospital. He slept in the chair beside her bed. He charmed the nursing staff into bending visitation rules. He ate vending machine sandwiches and did not complain once. On the second day, one of Maya's colleagues, a nurse on her floor who had attended the wedding, came by during her lunch break and found Daniel reading quietly while Maya slept, and she told the story to every person on their unit, and every person on their unit cried. On the fifth day, Maya was discharged. And here is the part of this story that will stay with you. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in October, with no guests invited except both sets of parents and their closest friends, Daniel and Maya got married in the hospital chapel. The same hospital where they had met. The same building where Daniel had hummed to himself through the hallways at 2 in the morning and Maya had called him out from a patient's doorway. The same place where they had drunk terrible break room coffee and fallen into something neither of them had planned. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Maya wore a simple cream dress her sister found at a boutique the week before. Daniel wore the same suit from the original wedding, freshly pressed, with a dusty rose pocket square that matched the original flower arrangements. Diane cried the entire time. Daniel's mother cried the entire time. The hospital chaplain told them afterward that in 22 years of performing ceremonies in that chapel, he had never felt a room carry so much meaning in so little space. People who heard this story afterward asked Maya different versions of the same question: why didn't you just tell him? Why didn't you say something when the pain started? And Maya's answer was always the same. She said she had spent so long being the strong one, at work, in her family, in every relationship she had ever had, that she genuinely did not know how to ask for help without feeling like she was failing. She said that the hardest thing she ever learned was that being cared for is not weakness. That letting someone in does not diminish you. It just means you finally trust them enough. And she said that when she woke up on that hospital floor and looked up at Daniel's face, that terrified, wide-open, completely unguarded face, she understood for the first time what it felt like to be fully known by another person and have them stay anyway. So here is what I want to ask you directly, because this story deserves more than just being watched. Have you ever hidden something painful from the people closest to you because you were afraid of being a burden? Have you ever smiled through something privately devastating because you did not want to worry someone you love? And if you were Daniel, if the person you loved collapsed in front of you on the most important day of your lives, what would you have done? Would you have been able to stay as calm as he did? Or would the fear have taken over? Let us know in the comments. Because the responses to questions like these remind us that none of us are as alone in our experiences as we think we are. Maya and Daniel have been married for 2 years now. Maya still works nights in the cardiac unit. Daniel still hums in the hallway at 2 in the morning. She still calls him out about it. And every September, on the anniversary of the original wedding day, the one that never officially happened, they go back to that church in downtown Columbus. They sit in the front pew together. They do not do anything dramatic. They just sit there for a little while in the quiet, in the same light that poured through those stained glass windows on the afternoon she collapsed in his arms. And then they go home. Because the story did not end on that floor. It just found a different direction. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone you love or something you have been carrying quietly for too long, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new to this channel, subscribe now. Because we tell stories like this every week, real, emotional, human stories about the moments that define us. The next story we have coming is one you are not going to want to miss.